On January 3, 2026, the United States stunned the world by capturing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in an operation involving over 150 aircraft and elite Delta Force operators. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately suggested America now knows what to do next with dictators like Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. While most analysts dismissed this as impossible, the question remains, what would a theoretical operation to capture Putin actually require to succeed against a nuclear-armed state? This analysis examines every known vulnerability in Putin's security apparatus and explores how American intelligence could theoretically exploit these weaknesses using lessons from Operation Absolute Resolve, Israel's infamous Operation Rising Lion, and Ukraine's relentless drone strikes on Moscow and beyond. The critical foundation of any such operation would be insider betrayal, because Putin's security cannot be defeated from the outside alone, and the Maduro operation demonstrated the essential role of insider intelligence. CIA Director John Ratcliffe deployed a small team clandestinely into Venezuela, starting in August 2025, that provided extraordinary insight into Maduro's pattern of life that made grabbing him seamless. This pattern of life surveillance included monitoring where the target lived, how he moved when he was most vulnerable, and even the names of his pets, according to Pentagon officials. The Wagner Group mutiny of June 2023 proved that even Putin's most loyal forces can turn against the Russian state, with Russian security services appearing completely paralyzed throughout the crisis. Yevgeny Prigozhin's mercenaries advanced to within 200 kilometers of Moscow before halting, with Wagner forces taking the southern military district headquarters in Rostov-on-Don without firing a shot. European security officials told the Washington Post that despite warning Putin of a possible mutiny 2 or 3 days in advance when it began, there was paralysis on all levels, with absolute dismay and confusion. The Institute for the Study of War assessed that Wagner could have reached Moscow's outskirts if Prigozhin had chosen to continue the march northward, revealing catastrophic command failures. This revealed a critical vulnerability, because Russian forces were unable to organize effective resistance against a known threat moving openly on highways toward the capital. A covert American operation would benefit from the same confusion, but with inside conspirators actively sabotaging Russian command and control systems from within, just as U.S. Cyber Command did in Venezuela. The Venezuela operation demonstrated how cyber warfare can blind an entire capital city, with Trump stating that lights in Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane confirmed that U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, and other combatant commands began layering different effects to create a pathway for U.S. forces. The blackout coincided with the opening phase of air operations, reducing visibility and coordination for Venezuelan forces, demonstrating a template for Moscow. American intelligence has cultivated assets within the Russian military since the Cold War, and the Ukraine war has created unprecedented disillusionment among officers who have seen catastrophic losses. High-ranking officials have been defecting since February 2022, including FSB officers, military commanders, and even Putin's own Federal Protective Service members carrying classified documents. Vladimir Osechkin's organization Gulagu.net has helped numerous defectors escape Russia, including a former 3-star general carrying military documents and intelligence recordings about FSB operations. The FSB's own officers launched the Wind of Change letter campaign, expressing disgust with Putin's war and willingness to share information with Western contacts, revealing internal dissent. Gleb Karakulov, a captain in Putin's Federal Protection Service, defected in October 2022, revealing intimate details of presidential security protocols that Western intelligence now possesses. Karakulov disclosed that Putin uses identical offices in 3 locations, Novo-Ogaryovo, Sochi, and St. Petersburg, to confuse intelligence about his exact whereabouts at any given time. He revealed that Russian security uses fake motorcades and decoy aircraft to pretend Putin is leaving when he actually remains in a different location entirely. This deception protocol could be exploited by American intelligence if insider conspirators revealed Putin's actual location at the critical moment of extraction, just as CIA assets tracked Maduro's movements. Karakulov confirmed that Putin never uses a mobile phone or internet, receiving information only from his closest circle, creating an information cocoon that conspirators could manipulate during an operation. This isolation means Putin depends entirely on subordinates for situational awareness, and conspirators could feed false information to create the 30-minute confusion window needed for extraction. Since you've made it this far, you're clearly enjoying the content, so why not hit subscribe and drop a like? It really helps out. All right, let's keep going. The defector revealed Putin travels primarily by armored train because, unlike aircraft, trains cannot be tracked on publicly available flight monitoring services. American intelligence could exploit this pattern by having insider conspirators confirm when Putin boards his train and its precise destination, just as CIA tracked Maduro down to his compound location. The May 2023 drone attack on the Kremlin exposed glaring vulnerabilities in Moscow's supposedly impenetrable air defense network, with drones reaching the Senate Palace dome itself. The incident demonstrated that Russian air defenses, which are oriented toward missiles and aircraft, were simply not designed to detect and engage short-range drones flying very low over the ground. Mark Kansian of the Center for Strategic and International Studies explained that part of the reason drones could make it to Moscow undetected was because Russian defenses focus on more sophisticated weapons. The Kremlin's vulnerability to the low and slow approach was demonstrated way back in 1987 when German amateur pilot Matthias Rust landed a Cessna near Red Square after penetrating Soviet airspace. Subsequent drone attacks in July 2023 struck buildings just 4 miles from the Kremlin, forcing temporary closure of Vnukovo Airport and revealing persistent defense gaps. By December 2025, Ukraine was launching record drone barrages, with Russia claiming to have shot down over 4,300 drones that month alone, with many penetrating Moscow airspace. Ukrainian attacks caused Russia $74 billion in damage in 2025 alone, targeting missile factories, military airfields, and oil refineries, according to Ukrainian military assessments. The record-breaking attacks included striking targets over 1,800 kilometers from Ukrainian territory, demonstrating the range that long-distance operations can achieve against Russia. Israel's October 2024 strikes on Iran provide the definitive template for neutralizing Russian-made air defenses using the exact S-300 systems that protect Moscow. Israeli Air Force deployed over 100 aircraft, including F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters, traveling 2,000 kilometers to strike Iranian military targets with complete success. Israel carried out 3 waves of strikes, with the first wave specifically targeting Iran's air defenses, destroying nearly all of its advanced S-300 systems, according to U.S. and Israeli officials. Fox News quoted a senior Israeli official saying that the majority of Iran's air defense was taken out, leaving it essentially naked to future strikes. The strikes rendered defenseless major Iranian facilities, including Khuzestan province's Abadan oil refinery, the Bandar Imam Khomeini petrochemical complex, and adjacent major ports. Iran had only 4 S-300 systems at the beginning of 2024, and Israel destroyed all of them, including 1 in April and 3 more in the October strikes. The Times of Israel reported that Israel took out primary Iranian air defenses, leaving the regime and its core assets more exposed and vulnerable than they had been in decades. Even more remarkably, Israeli commandos launched drones from within Iran itself that struck surface-to-air missile launchers, clearing the way for the larger strike package. According to Israeli outlet N12, citing security sources, Mossad meticulously prepared for months, including placing agents in Iran who operated one-way attack drones and established covert drone bases. These operatives established at least some drone and missile bases in the open not far from Iran's air defense systems, according to reports from the covert operation. The war zone reported that shortly before the operation, Israeli drones launched from within Iran struck surface-to-air missile launchers, explaining the apparent inactivity of Iranian air defenses. This would explain why 100 Israeli jets were able to take a joyride over Iranian targets for hours without Iran laying a finger on them. A theoretical Putin capture operation could replicate this approach with CIA operatives pre-positioning drones inside Russia to neutralize S-300 and S-400 batteries protecting Moscow. American Special Operations Forces would then enter through a pre-arranged access point secured by insider conspirators at the precise moment when defenses are suppressed. The extraction team would be Delta Force operators from the Army's elite 1st Special Forces operational Detachment-Delta, which captured Maduro in Caracas. Delta Force is organized into saber squadrons broken down into assault and reconnaissance troops, allowing small specialized teams to deploy globally at a moment's notice. The unit has previously captured Saddam Hussein in December 2003 and killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in October 2019, demonstrating its capability against high-value targets. Transport would be provided by the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, known as the Night Stalkers, who flew the Maduro extraction using MH-60 Blackhawks. The Night Stalkers were established in 1981 following the failure of Operation Eagle Claw and flew missions in Tora Bora Takur Gar and transported Saddam Hussein after capture. In the Maduro operation, helicopters flew 100 feet above the Caribbean Sea until reaching land, while fighters and bombers provided air cover for the extraction force. The military rehearsed using a replica of Maduro's compound, with Trump stating they actually built a house which was identical to the one they went into with all the same steel. This allowed special forces to break through steel doors in a matter of seconds using high-temperature cutting torches rather than conventional explosives, reducing risk. The ideal extraction point for Putin would be Novo Ogaryovo, his primary residence just 10 kilometers west of Moscow, with helicopter access toward international waters. Alternatively, conspirators could manufacture a crisis requiring Putin's presence at the Southern Military District headquarters in Rostov-on-Don, the same location Wagner forces seized during their mutiny. This location offers proximity to the Black Sea and potential extraction by submarine or seaplane, with conspirators potentially controlling local air defense assets. The FSB itself contains factions that view Putin as having destroyed Russia's international standing, and leaked documents reveal deep internal dysfunction and corruption. A 2024 leaked FSB counterintelligence document revealed the agency internally labels China as the enemy and accuses Beijing of aggressively recruiting Russian officials. Current and former officials described the Russian security service as rife with corruption, beset by bureaucratic bloat, and ultimately out of touch with ground realities. A Ukrainian intelligence official said the FSB had spent millions recruiting pro-Russian collaborators who ultimately told Putin and his advisors what they wanted to hear, not the truth. Leaked letters from FSB analysts reveal systemic problems, with one stating, "You have to write analysis in a way that makes Russia the victor. Otherwise you get questioned." The FSB's failure to prevent the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack in March 2024, which killed 144 people despite explicit US warnings, demonstrated catastrophic incompetence. 3 days before the attack, Putin publicly dismissed Western warnings of a potential attack as provocative and resembling outright blackmail, despite specific intelligence about the venue. In August 2024, Ukrainian forces crossed into Kursk Oblast, catching FSB border guard conscripts completely off guard, with some reportedly even unarmed on the border. The Ukraine war has created unprecedented casualties, with estimates exceeding 300,000 Russian dead and wounded, generating massive internal opposition among military families. Economic sanctions have degraded living standards, while oligarchs have seen fortunes frozen, creating powerful enemies who might support regime change for self-preservation. American intelligence would need a significant period of cultivation to identify, verify, and coordinate with potential conspirators without detection by FSB counterintelligence units, just as the CIA spent months in Venezuela. The conspiracy would require compartmentalization, where most participants know only their specific role without understanding the full scope of the operation, limiting damage from potential exposure. Communication between American handlers and Russian conspirators would use one-time pads, dead drops, and other Cold War tradecraft to avoid electronic detection by Russian signals intelligence. The timing would need to coincide with a moment when Putin is at a known location with conspirators controlling key security positions, simultaneously creating the extraction window. Karakulov confirmed that FSO military personnel exclusively handle all food preparation for Putin, meaning conspirators could introduce incapacitating agents undetected into his meals. The sedative would need to act within minutes, rendering Putin unconscious without causing cardiac arrest or other medical emergencies that complicate extraction, similar to techniques used in hostage rescues. IA-18 Growler electronic warfare aircraft like those used in the Venezuela operation could jam Russian radars, flooding the electromagnetic spectrum and forcing air defense systems to shut down. The Venezuela operation used more than 150 aircraft including B-1B Lancer bombers, F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs and FA-18 Super Hornets launched from 20 different bases. E-2 Hawkeye early warning aircraft and numerous intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance platforms provided real-time situational awareness throughout the Maduro operation. The National Security Agency provided geolocation support, while multiple U.S. spy offices stood up crisis action teams, feeding intelligence to Special Operations Command throughout. Nuclear command and control presents the greatest challenge because any attack on Putin could theoretically trigger dead-hand protocols for automatic retaliatory launches. However, the operation would be designed as capture, not assassination, avoiding the tripwires that activate Russia's perimeter automatic retaliation system, which requires confirmation of presidential death. Russian nuclear doctrine requires confirmation that the president has been killed before automatic launch authorization transfers to backup command structures, leaving a critical window. A successful capture would leave Putin alive but in American custody, creating legal ambiguity that prevents automatic nuclear response from Russian strategic forces commanders. Conspirators within the General Staff would need to delay any nuclear escalation orders, claiming they need verification before executing irreversible strategic commands, buying critical time. The confusion window created by insider sabotage combined with communications disruption could last 6 to 12 hours, sufficient time to announce Putin is alive and negotiate de-escalation. China would be secretly informed after the operation. This diplomatic channel would emphasize that Putin is being captured for criminal prosecution, not that America is attacking Russian sovereignty or strategic forces infrastructure. The extracted Putin would be transported to a U.S. Navy vessel similar to how Maduro was taken to the USS Iwo Jima, which served as the Special Operations mothership. The International Criminal Court warrant for Putin's arrest, issued in March 2023, provides legal cover framing the operation as enforcement of international justice. American officials would immediately broadcast that Putin is alive in custody facing trial and that no attack on Russian territory or strategic forces has occurred. This messaging would aim to prevent Russian military commanders from interpreting the situation as requiring nuclear retaliation against American targets anywhere globally. The conspirators remaining in Russia would move to arrest hardliners who might attempt unauthorized nuclear launches, creating a controlled transition of power from within. A pre-selected successor, possibly a general involved in the conspiracy, would announce that Russia is standing down to prevent further escalation and catastrophic miscalculation. Historical precedent shows that authoritarian regimes often fall through internal betrayal rather than external military defeat, as the Soviet Union itself demonstrated. Stalin's own security chief Lavrentiy Beria was arrested by fellow Politburo members in 1953, proving that even totalitarian leaders are vulnerable to palace coups. Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu was overthrown in 1989 when his own military turned against him during the December Revolution and executed him within days. The Maduro operation demonstrated that months of covert CIA preparation combined with overwhelming military force can extract a sitting head of state from their own capital. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA, Director John Ratcliffe, Advisor Stephen Miller and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth formed a core team working daily for months on the Venezuela operation. Trump watched the operation in real time from Mar-a-Lago, stating he watched it literally like a television show as operators breached Maduro's compound. The operation lasted less than 3 hours from helicopter insertion to extraction, with forces over the water at 3:29 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with targets aboard. Maduro was attempting to flee to a safe room when U.S. troops grabbed him, demonstrating how even prepared escape routes can be neutralized with proper intelligence. The key conspirators for a Putin operation would need to include the commander of the Presidential Security Service and senior officers in FSO communications directorates. These insiders would provide real-time intelligence on Putin's exact location, disable alarm systems, and ensure extraction routes remain clear during the critical 30-minute window. Putin's underground bunker network presents both challenge and opportunity because these facilities have limited entry points that could be controlled by conspirators with access. The FSO operates a secret underground metro system connecting key government facilities in Moscow, which could provide extraction routes for insider collaborators. Karakulov revealed that Putin ordered construction of a bunker at the Russian embassy in Kazakhstan during his October 2022 visit, demonstrating vulnerability during foreign travel. A state visit to a friendly nation secretly cooperating with American intelligence could provide the staging ground for extraction during an official Putin visit overseas. The success of this scenario depends entirely on the depth and reliability of insider conspiracy, because external force alone cannot defeat Russian defenses without internal betrayal. The Venezuela operation succeeded partly because American intelligence had assistance from regime insiders who recognized that cooperation served their interests and potentially earned $50 million rewards. The United States could offer similar financial incentives to Russian generals and security officials willing to facilitate Putin's extraction from Russian territory. Payments could reach hundreds of millions of dollars for senior conspirators with guaranteed asylum immunity from prosecution and new identities in the West for their families. This scenario, while theoretically informed by demonstrated operational capabilities, remains extraordinarily risky because any failure could trigger civilization-ending nuclear escalation. A botched operation that kills Putin or is detected before completion could be interpreted as American first strike, triggering automatic retaliation protocols against US and NATO targets. The margin for error is essentially zero because nuclear powers have never attempted direct military action against each other's leadership throughout the entire Cold War. The mutually assured destruction framework that has prevented superpower conflict for 7 decades would be fundamentally challenged by any such operation attempt. Intelligence failures, communication breakdowns, or conspirator betrayal could transform a targeted extraction into the opening act of thermonuclear war, killing hundreds of millions. For these reasons, no American president has ever authorized operations against nuclear-armed adversary leadership, regardless of crimes committed or opportunities that seemed to present themselves. The Maduro precedent applies only to non-nuclear states without great power protection, where escalation risks remain manageable and consequences are limited to conventional conflict. Putin's Russia presents a categorically different challenge where the theoretical possibility of capture is overwhelmed by catastrophic existential risks of attempting it. The scenarios described represent intellectual analysis of demonstrated vulnerabilities and operational precedents, not advocacy for actions that could result in human extinction. However, the analysis reveals that Putin's security is far from impenetrable, and internal Russian dysfunction creates theoretical vulnerabilities that adversaries could exploit. The Wagner mutiny exposed paralysis in Russian command structures. The Ukraine war has generated massive internal opposition, and defectors continue to reveal security protocols. Israeli operations proved that Russian-made air defenses can be systematically destroyed, while Ukrainian drones demonstrate Moscow's persistent vulnerability to low-altitude penetration. The Maduro operation established a new template for capturing hostile leaders using integrated cyber-electronic warfare, aerial and special operations capabilities with months of patient intelligence preparation. American capabilities demonstrated in Venezuela, including cyber attacks that blacked out the capital's stealth helicopter insertion and precise special operations extraction, have never been greater. Yet the nuclear dimension transforms the calculus entirely, making theoretical military feasibility irrelevant compared to unacceptable risk of triggering strategic exchange. History suggests Putin will leave power through internal Russian processes, natural causes, political transition, or potentially internal coup rather than external military intervention. The patient application of economic pressure, military support for Ukraine, and diplomatic isolation remains the only responsible path forward, despite understandable frustrations. The vulnerabilities catalogued in this analysis may eventually be exploited not by American forces, but by Russians themselves who conclude Putin's removal serves their nation. When that moment comes, the technical intelligence gathered by Western agencies through defectors, drone operations, and surveillance will prove invaluable to internal conspirators. The same FSO officers, FSB agents, and military commanders cultivated by American intelligence could become the architects of Russia's own palace revolution. Until then, the world watches as Putin's security apparatus reveals ever more cracks while American capabilities continue advancing to unprecedented levels of precision and integration. The Maduro capture demonstrated that in the 21st century, no dictator is truly beyond reach of American power when political will, intelligence, and military capability align. For Putin, the lesson is clear. His security depends not on bunkers, trains, or decoy convoys, but on the loyalty of subordinates who increasingly question his leadership. For America, the lesson is equally clear. Capabilities exist to theoretically reach any target, but wisdom requires recognizing when the cost of action exceeds any conceivable benefit. The gap between what is militarily possible and what is strategically prudent has never been wider than in contemplating operations against nuclear-armed adversaries. This analysis therefore concludes not with advocacy for action, but with recognition that understanding vulnerabilities serves deterrence, stability, and ultimately peace. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.